perhaps it needs to be thought of again on a kind of case-by-case basis, because perhaps I agree, if you've got a little corner shop that was once a corner shop and it's now not a corner shop, you don't need to be able to see in and see vibrancy through the window. But where you've got 40 retail units in a row that sit outside of your core area, as is the case, or in fact 30, as is in the case on Canal Terrace, I think it does detract from the aims of regenerating a neighbourhood if what you have is a whole load of shop fronts that are frosted or boarded or provide no...
I'm with you.
Yeah. So perhaps it's a case-by-case.
It's a matter of looking at it and saying, what effect, what chances are, and everything else. You know, as viability of whether by going down that route you're actually going to cause damage or not damage to that little parade. But when you have a long parade, then it's slightly different criteria.
I mean, Mozart Street, for example, is probably quite a good example, which is almost straddles the two, doesn't it? It used to be a shopping area. I don't think it is anymore. They've got been down there for a while, but it's a bit more than if you went all residential, it would lose something, wouldn't it?
Yes, I think it's very difficult to turn what was conceived of as a shopping street into an entirely residential street without losing something. Some of the units have had sort of brick facades put in place of the shop fronts. Others stand boarded up with wooden boards over the doors. We've lost a post office, a pub, the shops, the main shops, and I think, you know, if we're looking to try and bring something back, even if it is a B1 use, it would be good if it was something that retained the character of the street as it was intended to be. In other words, that gave the impression of some sort of vibrancy rather than a completely dead street.
Do you need to be prescriptive about the time element on it's been on the market for it? Do you need to be prescriptive?
No, that's what we're exploring, is what criteria we should have.
Could you not say words to the effect that, depending upon the circumstances, we would expect the premises to be marketed for a reasonable period, and then leave the reasonable located to the actual units, which gives you flexibility again to make a decision, or is that too flexible for you, as planners?
We can look at I mean, it's your option going forward, and we can look at how that might be expressed as a planning policy, and then sort of have another look at whether or not it could work. So, as an idea, we can work with that. That would solve the problem,
wouldn't it? Because then, for example, in our little parade of 3, it would be a different criteria to that of a parade of 25. You could use that would be a matter of policy that depending upon the local circumstances.
Okay, and what about within the core frontages?
That's much more different.
Oh, what, sorry?
Within the core frontages, for those not familiar, within there's a designated shopping area, and it's typically made up of secondary frontages, which we often allow to go to things like, you know, sort of cafes, restaurants, and those sorts of things. Then there's the core frontage, and typically they're very rigid about those, and they really are intended to stay as the A1 units. They're the core of that shopping area, and often that's to do with ensuring that the local services remain available, even though you might have other things on the periphery.
You have a problem there, and we've been discussing it at other meetings, that one has to accept the fact that perhaps when these core frontages were built, there was a tremendous demand for the small shops. But times have changed, and they didn't have supermarkets when these places were built. They didn't have drive-in stores and all the other things that happen now. And it may well be that there is literally insufficient demand. And you have to look at the demand that there will be. And if there is no demand, then you have to create a demand if you can. If not, you have to accept the fact they're going to have to be changed. The use is going to have to be changed.
But do we know if we've got a particular problem with long-term vacancies in the core frontage, Lisa, or not?
I think the information's there, and unfortunately Hilary sends her apologies, she couldn't come, she typically deals with the retail, but the new town centre health checks are due to be published. They're being published incrementally at the moment, and those town centre health checks will help all of us, I think, if we have a look at those and help us think further about this issue, about where there's particular town centres that are underperforming, what the issue of vacancy is, and where the vacancy arises, whether or not it's as ingrained as going right into the core frontages or whether it's more in the periphery. And I'd have to admit that probably no one here is familiar with the absolute detail of those, and the work's just being finished off at the moment.
We were having this discussion in the break about what happened to Salisbury Road or Kensal Rise and stuff, and actually a lot of the regeneration of those areas, there's been an anchor tenant, there's typically a gastro pub or a cafe that starts attracting people. So I think in terms of regeneration, some flexibility. Is it A3? Is it cafe? It's quite useful. The thing that I'm not sure about in my own mind is about how much we try and control the type of A1. Maybe that's not our role, but
we cannot.
We can't.
Legally. Yeah.
It's such a shame. In poor areas, you end up with the 4 bookmakers and the 4 chemists.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the key issues that Marco's raised, is that A1, the planning system too often puts A1s as the best use for a town centre. It just isn't the case. I mean, a mobile phone shop does nothing to a centre compared to a cafe or a gastro club. And unfortunately, there does need to be much more flexibility about the loss of A1. And I know the type of A3 can be difficult, but maybe some thought about how, whether it's through tenancy agreements which promote good practice, good waste management, and social behaviour, people signing up to antisocial behaviour schemes and that sort of thing. I think there does need to be.
But also, you have to be careful that regeneration is a really tricky term, because the gastropub won't offer anything to 80% of residents in Church Street because they couldn't afford to eat in there. So you have to balance providing the need with the A1 with attractive visitors, and we constantly look at about regeneration of Church Street Market. I'm always asked, well, what are you trying to achieve? Because local people use that every day to shop, and yet I'm suggesting it could be on London's tourist attraction. So there's a balance between attracting visitors and meeting the needs of what are poor areas, given the nature of housing.
But it could provide 4 or 5 jobs, local jobs.
Yes.
I was going to raise that issue too, and I don't know whether the planning has the capacity to deal with it, because Salisbury Road's been mentioned and a number of others, but one of the things when the whole Harrow Road plan was being developed is that people constantly said, but we don't want it to go all shishi. We don't want it to go, they want change, but they don't want it turned into something for other people in that kind of lock, stock and barrel way. And I don't know whether that's a planning matter or not, to be honest, but I do think we need, as Marco has done, to have that articulated very firmly.
Okay.
I think there's a problem here in that the needs and desires of the residents is articulated by officers and then becomes their preserve.
I think that's why you're all here today. You tell us, we just want to listen and see what we can do.
I think that's a bit unfair, because if you attend many planning meetings, you'll find officers' recommendations are not always held to, much against their chagrin. But, Councillor Graham doesn't agree with officers all the time, I can tell you.
I'm just reflecting on being a tenant of the council for 40 years, living in the area and reading all the minutes of this organisation. Just so.
Yeah, fair comment.
Okay. I think a lot of what we've just discussed at the moment has sort of ventured into question 7, but if we are looking at that additional flexibility, we're looking at these B1 uses taking over existing the existing vacant uses. Sort of what criteria are we looking at? And I think we've already discussed that in quite a lot of detail in relation to how we would ensure vitality, viability, character. And actually, I think there's an interesting point that's been raised, which is, are those things that are listed there that come up time and time again under the retail heading, are they the most important things, or are there other things we should be looking at, such as employment opportunities within these town centres that aren't normally associated with thinking about retail, but within this area may be equally important? as maintaining the viability. So that's certainly something I'll take away from today. Are there any
I
other
think the best example
criteria?
has been given on a gastropub, where it may be not suitable for those people who live around there because they can't afford it,
Yeah.
but it might encourage employment, and it might encourage tertiary other occupiers in the parade
Yeah.
to come along who might get a spin-off from it. I can't think of what, but they might. So those factors should always be taken into account rather than just, we don't want it.
And perhaps to support some of these other employment uses that we're wanting to move into here and make it more attractive for Overspill from Paddington and Central area. Okay. Were there any other criteria-related points that anybody wanted to raise?
I mean, just one point from the property division is one of the emerging strategies of the council is the co-location of public services in very accessible locations, and a lot of those, by very definition, tend to be town centre type areas. So I know Church Street is one example where lots of services will be located in one very efficient, very high quality building. It's just ensuring there's flexibility that would allow the loss of maybe some retail floor space to enable the community facilities to be located.
Okay.
Well, it's already that low, obviously, anyway.
Well, yeah,
That makes sure it's carried.
it includes an A1.